Bang! Neeves knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife CARHARTT is at work, and today we are talking about some sharpening tips for people that are trying to begin how to freehand. And I failed that, so there you go. This is the Tucson TS195 Silverback. I do have a review on it. It is an integral Tucson. Very, very awesome knife. Now, first step, just really quick, I just want to go over how to freehand. So you get a stone. I got a whole list of sharpening equipment down in the description, a whole bunch of links that I highly recommend. So first up, find your stone. I will recommend some stones here in just a minute, but find a low grit stone. Just get an angle. You don't have to think about it too much. You don't want the knife too high, and you don't want it laying down too low. Just find an angle. The muscle memory is the most important part, is being able to replicate the same motion over and over and over. So you don't want to think about it, or you don't want to think about the angle too much. You want to think more about replicating the same motion over and over and over and over. Now, next, no matter what, patience, patience, patience. Do not ever start sharpening if you're angry, upset, having a bad day. Always make sure you're in a good mood, you're nice and patient, and take your time. Don't rush nothing. Always check your progress, consistently looking at your edge, and just take your time. Just a quick side note, tomorrow, which is Friday at 12 o'clock noon Central Time, I'm going to do a live freehand sharpening. So if you want to join me, or if you just want to come and hang out and chit chat, join me at noon tomorrow. And if you can't make it tomorrow, then if you want to add any questions into this video, I will answer them tomorrow during the live, or try to show you. So there you guys go. Tomorrow, 12 o'clock, noon Central Time. What to start with? So like I said, I have a whole list down in the description of sharpening supplies, but I recommend aluminum oxide stones, Arkansas stones, or diamond stones to start off with first. I have a pack down in the description for around 49 bucks, between 45 and 50 bucks. It'll give you 3 diamond stones, 300 grit, 600 grit, and 1200 grit. Will give you an amazing edge. I can get a hair whittling edge off a 300 grit. This is a 600 right here. And then also this base is down there in the description also. Now, I have a bunch of aluminum oxide stones down there. There's different kinds. There's India. There's lots of different kinds. They're oil stones, but you can use soap and water. You just want to mix a bottle with a little bit of soap and some water, shake it up, and you can use that. But oil is what they recommend. So, yeah, I recommend these because they're a lot less maintenance than a water stone. A water stone can be very high maintenance. You have to get a flattening stone. You got to make sure they're flat. Lots of different things. Now, these eventually you're going to have to flatten because eventually they will start wearing, but it will take a while. So, there you go. Diamond stones, you never have to flatten, but eventually you'll have to replace them. But they will last you a long time, as long as you don't put too much pressure on them. Just let the diamonds do the cutting. Don't use pressure. Just use enough pressure to where you can hold your angle. If you're putting pressure, the plates won't last you as long. So try not to put any pressure and just let the diamonds do the cutting. Same thing with the aluminum oxide stones, but you can put a little bit of pressure, but basically let the stones do the sharpening for you, not pressure. Next, problems you will run into. So your biggest problems are going to be 2 spots, the tip and the heel, okay? Because a lot of plunge grinds are different. Every plunge grind is different. Some knives, I'm just going to bust out a few knives that I have sitting here. See how this one has a sharpening choil, this one has a decent sharpening choil. This one has a decent sharpening choil. Some knives do not have decent sharpening choils, and some knives you will create smiles. Some of them will wind up in thicker areas. Some knives will give you thick spots like this where it takes a little more work. Some knives won't have a like Spyderco's. Spyderco's don't really give you a sharpening notch or sharpening choil. So you'll have spots like that you'll have to make sure you don't go past here. Now, when you're going to get the heel of the blade and you want to sharpen it, if you're having trouble in that area, one thing, you could just keep working at it and keep going at it, taking your time. Always make sure you take your time. But when you have your angle and you keep sharpening your angle, make sure you keep that angle and then just do a little more work. You can do back and forth motions. If you put any pressure here and work on it, make sure your blade does not lift up or down. Make sure it stays flat on the angle when you do that. Otherwise, your mark or your sharpening will work its way up this way because you're bent. So make sure it stays nice and flat when you're working on this area, or you could just keep doing your motions back and forth until you fully hit it. And then with the tip, when you get to it, after you followed your angle and you get to the tip, make sure you're dragging it across the stone. You're basically just trying to shave a layer off of the stone. As you're coming across the stone, you're going to lift your elbow or your wrist in order to get to the tip. You can add a little bit of pressure and get right there. Very little pressure though, not a lot of pressure, just a little bit. There's so many different styles of knives and different shapes and different choils and stuff like that. So that's going to be an area that's going to give you a little bit of problems. But problems that I'm more leaning toward are like, okay, so some knives, you always want to look at where it locks up back here. So like right here, this one lands right here. So this one's not a big deal. But some knives land literally right there, like this one. So it's literally right underneath this edge. If I break into here and I'm not careful, I could end up hitting down inside there and then mess it up on closing and locking up as it's closing. Now, most companies are pretty good with keeping it out of the way, but some companies don't, like this one right here, this Integral. It literally locks up right where that mark is. It's literally directly under my edge right now. So if I continue to sharpen this, it's going to eventually go to right here. Basically just cutting off the edge. So when I cut off the edge, it will be hitting, so like after the next maybe 2 sharpenings, it will hit that area. And now my edge is going to be from here all the way across the blade all the way to here. So this whole area will be my edge in the future. So if I continue to sharpen right here, this knife will not lock up closed. It will go past there. So what I have to do on this knife is to prevent it from hitting this area and messing the knife up, I have to continue to sharpen up this way. I cannot sharpen back this way. So all my edges have to stay in this general zone right here. I have to make sure all my serrations and all my grip pattern goes this way up the blade, and I leave this whole portion alone so that it can close without having problems. Now, the one little problem with that, which isn't that big of a deal, but eventually, the more I sharpen it, it's going to, the edge is going to be above my finger up here. So like if I sharpen it a ton, my edge is going to be all the way up where you see the black you know, serration. So it's going to be behind my finger. Not that big of a deal, but it is still a thing. Now, you might think, well, man, it's going to take a lot of sharpenings. Well, maybe not. Because if I chip this blade, right, if I chip my tip. If I chip my tip off, guess what? I'm sharpening it enough to where it will definitely hit that area. If I chip my blade, it will definitely take enough sharpenings to where it will hit that area. And if I didn't know any better, and I didn't pay attention and know where it's locking up at when it's closed, I would 100% sharpen into that area and not even think twice about it. Because a lot of people don't think about where does it stop at when it's closed. Everybody thinks about where it locks up at when it's opened. Right here is the stop pin, but not stop pin, but this is where it locks up at. It locks up on the titanium. But a lot of people don't think about where it locks up when it's closed. You have to think about that when you're sharpening. Always think about that, because that's going to be that can end up being an issue if you don't pay attention. So as long as you pay attention. Now, knives to stay away from. Knives to basically the knives you want to start off sharpening and the ones you don't want to. Okay, so one, you want to stay away from any gas station knives. A couple different reasons. One, their grinds are always off. And number two, their heat treat is crap. Some of the hardest knives I've ever sharpened were cheap gas station knives. Sometimes they don't even, it's just they're so soft and they're gummy, they don't like to sharpen. It's crap and it sucks to sharpen. It's just hell. It's hell even getting a good edge on one that is to the standards that I want it to be. And I'm not saying some won't sharpen, but I'm saying you have a good chance that it'll be harder than a good quality knife with a good heat treat. Now, I'm not saying you have to spend $100. I'm saying a $15 knife, as long as it's a good brand. So look for budget knives, $20, even $15 to $20, $30, $40, and practice on one of those. There's lots of brands out there that have knives under $40 that are a good budget, and they have good steel, good heat treat. And you can start with a budget steel, but just make sure it isn't a no-name brand, for one, and make sure it's not a brand that's been known to sell crap. You know, make sure it's a brand that has a reputation of having good quality, especially in their steel, because it can definitely bite you. Or, you know, it just, you'll wind up not sharpening no more because you'll be so frustrated. So make sure you get at least a decent quality budget knife to practice on. Now, another one is any type of knife that is hand ground. Okay, hand ground knives, you know, it's not a machine that ground it. They didn't put it in a robot and a robot did it. A human hand did it. Now, even when they use, say, like a jig, which is like so say if I'm going to sharpen this knife, I'll have something that'll help me guide it as I'm putting it across the belt to help me grind these flat areas on a knife. Or, you know, any knife. You know, say the person that ground this knife, you know, even if it was done by hand, they probably had a jig like set up, some type of thing to make it a lot easier to where they didn't mess up. But they're still human. They still put pressure in some areas, tilt in some areas, maybe come off of it fast in some areas, which make little differences and nuances in the blade. It makes spots in the blade, like I can show you a couple, but a lot of hand ground knives I've seen, custom knives, stuff like that, they take a little bit more effort when freehanding or even in a fixed angle system, because they'll have little details like this. Like if you notice on this one how it's kind of wavy. Doggone it. Hang on, it's trying to focus on other stuff. Let's just zoom in. Okay, see how the edge kind of has a little bit of a wave? Now that's the same angle all the way across. It's just that this was hand ground. And this is also a prototype, so this isn't a knife that's being sold or anything. This is just a testing knife, so this isn't something that's being sold or anything. But I've noticed that on a lot of custom knives. Here I've got another one. If I can reach it. This knife, this is a custom knife, and you see the wave in there. That's the same angle. You'll also notice this top grind right here. See how it goes all the way to the first jimping? Look at the other side, how it's back here. It's all hand ground. Same thing on this side. Look at the choil right here, how the smile goes back right there. That's because of the plunge grind. On this side, they didn't have that problem. So like stuff like this, so if you're trying to match your angles and stuff like that, and learning to match your angles, don't start with a custom knife or a hand ground knife, because even if it's a quality, expensive hand ground knife, there are little inconsistencies in the blade, and you know, you just want to be aware of it. So there you guys go, just a couple little tips on freehand sharpening. I love you guys. Peace.